Hi everyone, welcome back to The Mystic in the Woods. I'm Kate, and today we're going to talk about working with plants as a sacred feminine mystery and my top 5 deck recommendations. So I mentioned this in the catch-up video. We've also talked about this over on the podcast. We are currently working on a Plant Magic as a Sacred Feminine Mystery 6-week workshop for our temple members. Now, module 1, dropped on Monday, and so if you want to get in on this, you are more than welcome to do so. The doors to the temple do close on October 3rd, so just keep that in mind. All the details are below. So plants have always been at the heart of the sacred feminine mysteries. In almost every tradition, in almost every lineage, across the world, across the globe, you are going to see plants as a core piece in some way of the sacred feminine mysteries within that lineage. We have the anointing oils of Mary Magdalene and the healing herbs of Morgan Le Fay. We have sacred smoke and incense and sacred smoke bundles. We have, plant medicines like ayahuasca and various mushrooms, and we have herbal medicine, and we have plant magic, and we have all of these various plants really at the heart of all of our sacred feminine mysteries. Even to the point of, if you're leaving offerings for deities, oftentimes this has plants in them. Wine is made out of plants. Mead is made out of honey, but where do you think the plants or the bees get the pollen to make the honey, right? These types of things have been at the heart of sacred feminine mysteries and practices and spirituality forever. So when I am looking at this topic, I am not just looking at spellcraft, although that is, of course, one of the aspects or one of the pillars or one of the ways in which we might connect with plants on our journeys. Now, the way that every witch connects with her plants on her witchcraft journey is going to be very different. So I'm speaking through a very specific lens, and if this doesn't align with your witchcraft practice or the way you've heard witchcraft talked about, that's completely fine. What I'm talking about here is a slightly different lens, and spellcraft is only one piece of it. So when I talk about the sacred feminine mysteries, plant magic, as a sacred feminine mystery, I'm looking at a handful of pillars from my own practice. So I have a list because I don't want to forget one. First is animism. And this is where we're really working with our plants as sovereign allies. This is that worldview of seeing spirit, of seeing an animating sovereign force within each thing in the natural world, right? So we see animism as a core worldview and core belief for practices around the world again, right? And when we connect with our plants in this way, in the same way we might connect with a personified deity or an ancestor, we can work with them as sacred teachers, as guides, as spirits that have information and lessons for us. And this is, I really think, a core piece of this particular plants as a sacred feminine mystery, is seeing them as that, as sovereign allies that we are working with, not just a tool we are using. And when I'm working with priestesses, for example, I really find that most priestesses have a plant that almost is a part of their energetic priestessing blueprint, if you will. And when I'm working with, just anybody on the sacred feminine path, like I do inside the temple, I find that a lot of us have plant allies that will step forward the same way guides will. That we have plant allies on our team, just like we have, animal allies or spirit allies, these kinds of things. And this is one of the things that makes plants so powerful as allies and teachers and a part of our practice, is that they exist here in the physical realm just like we do, and they exist in the spirit realm just like we do. And so they help us to bridge those realms in a really unique way. Now, the second pillar is energetic coherence. Now, this includes things like cleansing, purifying, protecting. It also includes simply changing the frequency of a space or a tool or something, and kind of changing that vibrational frequency, if you will. Now, these are all things we're going in depth in the workshop. I just want to talk about them all here briefly before I get into the decks. And I think that when we are, again, working with our plant allies as sovereign beings, spirits, it brings their ability to help us with clearing, cleansing, all of those things up to a new level. So they can really help us to cleanse, to ward, to bring or change the energetic frequency of a space when we are stepping into ceremony or when we are stepping into ritual. And I am very sorry if you can hear him snoring periodically in this video. This is my very senior dog, and he wanted to be in here with me today because he's not feeling very good. So I apologize if you're occasionally picking up some snoring from him. So back to the pillars. The third pillar is going to be healing, energetic healing, spiritual healing, physical healing, right? So the very obvious one here is herbal medicine, right? Is working with herbal medicine to heal a physical body. And this would have been a part, again, of all of our indigenous practices, all of our ancient practices. This would have been at the heart of temple mysteries and wise women and medicine women and all of these different sacred people around the world, right? Is using plants to heal our physical body. We can also work with plants to heal on an energetic level, for example, heal our auras or heal our energy centers. We can also work with them to heal spiritual wounding or emotional wounding, right? So our plants are amazing for that. One of the plants we'll talk about here when I get to decks is roses. They're a beautiful heart opener. They can really help us to open and strengthen our heart center. Yarrow is one of my favorite plant allies and can really help to heal your aura. And so these plants, whether we're working with them in smoke or tea or anointing oils or flower essences, depending on the plant in question, right? Please don't take anything internally without doing your research, using your common sense and speaking to a professional, because not all plants are safe to ingest. But regardless of, if you're doing that piece of it, I should say, regardless of the way in which we are working with these plants, maybe you're taking a flower essence or you have an anointing practice, they can help to do all of this energetic and spiritual work. And again, because they are here in the physical and they can touch our physical body, if it is safe to use that particular plant on your body, and they exist in the spiritual realm, they can really help us do this in a super powerful way. Number 4 is that they act as a bridge between us and the other realm, between us and the earth. They bridge us to our deities, to our ancestors, to our lineage, to the earth herself. Again, this is that they're here and they're there. They have, deep ancestral connections for us. They've worked with our ancestors for generations. They are associated with different deities. And of course, working with plants helps weave us back into the fabric and consciousness of the earth herself. We cannot survive without plants. We rely on them to create the oxygen that we breathe, the food that we eat, all of this stuff. And modern day society has really began to separate us from the earth, from the plants, from all of this. And by working with our plants, it helps to weave all of this back together. And it helps to heal things like all the programming around the 3D and our physical bodies being less, being sinful, being problematic. It really helps us to work with all of those things. Now, 5 and 6 are this. They help us get really local. The local land spirits, the local tree spirits, the herbs that grow in your garden, and also really universal because they have planetary associations, astrological associations, they have deity associations, they have elemental associations, all of these different things, right? So again, they help us to bridge the realms, they help us to bridge, the local with the universal, they help us to do all of these amazing things. And then, of course, the final pillar is spellcraft for transformation, for personal work, for all kinds of things, manifestation. And again, when we are working with our plant allies in all the ways I've already listed, it helps that spellcraft to be even more powerful for a lot of people. And again, if this does not align with your view of witchcraft, don't worry about it at all. So let's get into some deck recommendations because this is something that my temple members have been asking me for. These are my top decks for connecting with plants as a sacred feminine mystery. And of course, whatever deck you have or you feel called to use for something like this is perfect. I will link one below that I don't have that Alexandra highly recommends, and it's one of the astrology and herb ones. So I will link that below because I can't even remember the title off the top of my head. I can see the box. I can see the artwork. I have very seriously considered purchasing it. I'm just trying to be more intentional about the decks I bring into my collection, and I have plant decks that I really love. So first, let's talk about the Rose Oracle by Rebecca Campbell. Now, this is technically a runner-up because it is specific to roses. So if you're not working with the plant spirit of rose or the plant rose, then I'm not sure how well this deck would work. Now, I do have an unboxing and some thoughts on this deck on the channel already. And if you are working with rose, this one is a beautiful option for you to connect with that plant spirit, to get messages, all of that kind of thing. And if you don't know what plant to work with, you just know you want to start working with plants in this way, roses are an excellent choice because they are so deeply connected to the sacred feminine in general. And because when we're communicating with plants, we are communicating with them from our heart space, which is something we'll talk about in the workshop and maybe in like a separate video in the future. Rose is a heart opener. It helps our heart to open but still have boundaries. Think about how a rose has thorns, right? So this is an excellent deck for connecting with the plant and the spirit of rose. It's just a runner-up because, again, this is the only plant in the deck. It's just about roses. So we're going to go, there's not really a particular order here, but we're going to go kind of work towards my favorite, I guess. We're only doing 5 decks. It's a short list for me if you've been around for a while. Now, this is the Herbiary and the Bestiary Oracle. I have combined them, so I'm going to just skip the animal ones. But this creator has an animal deck, a crystal deck, and a plant deck. I have the plant and the animal deck. Now, this is one of my absolute favorite decks for clarification in general, and it is an excellent plant deck. The artwork is not like my absolute favorite, but I just find that this deck reads so clearly that I think that this is an excellent deck in general, but also really for communicating with plants, right? When I'm trying to get clear messages, I'm looking for a clarifier, for example. This one says, "We are one quaking aspen." I'm pretty sure I have the camera accidentally set, so this is all showing up backwards for you guys. This is what happens for me. I haven't been recording. Pocket of Protection, yarrow. The Ways of the Water, white willow. And one of the things that I really love about this deck is that it does include trees. So here's the willow card. This is quaking aspen. Because when we think about plant magic and herbal magic, we think about herbs. We think about yarrow and rose, but basil and thyme and these kinds of things. And that's absolutely true. But plant magic also includes our trees and our flowers and all the plants growing right outside your home. So I have found, for example, connecting with the trees that grow right near your home can be one of the most powerful allies to connect with because they witness so much and they can be really protective of their spaces and just I think they're excellent spirits to connect with. Now, we're going to do these two together. So this is the Illuminated Earth Oracle by Claire Mack. And this is the Faceted Garden Oracle by Claire Mack. When I am looking for a deck to work with plants, you kind of have a couple options, right? You have a deck like this where you have individual, so here's Rose, for example, where you have an individual plant on each card. I do enjoy this, and my favorite deck, those of you who have been around for a while probably know what it is like that. But when I'm looking to communicate with a plant in general, what I'm looking for is an earthy but open-ended deck. So I don't want to be personally, but whatever works for you is great. I don't want to be shoved into either anything that's really human and is going to really shove me into the human experience. And my brain also doesn't necessarily love this, where each plant has its own card. So I'm looking for decks that are earthy, that are open-ended, that will help me to connect with plants in general without pigeonholing me into something specific. Now, when I'm working with a deck like this and I'm working with a specific plant spirit, I'm going to use the message on the card as though it's coming from that plant spirit. So if I draw this card, Rose, Crack Open, from my plant spirit of Blue Lotus, then I'm going to take this as a message from Blue Lotus. But you certainly can draw from a card or from a deck like this to see which plant spirits are walking with you at this time. So these are Claire Mack's decks. I think I would really love her tarot deck. I think I do probably need to add that to my collection. For those of you who have been here for a while, you know that the Illuminated Earth Oracle is one of my favorite oracle decks of all time. I can feel this deck in my body when I read with it. It's very intuitive. It's very earthy. There are some animals on it and some people, but for the most part, it's very open, like I was just talking about. So here we have resistance, source, meander, potential. And this deck is just excellent for communicating with the spirits in general. So I may use this very conversationally. Pull a card, ask a question, pull a card, ask a question, pull a card. This type is if I'm having a conversation back and forth with my plant spirit. And what was I going to say there? So I may use a deck like either of these. Here's the Faceted Garden Oracle for a full spread. But I'm more likely to use it as that kind of conversational approach like I was just explaining. Now, this is the Faceted Garden Oracle, so it's much more gardeny, right? I think I would choose this one just a little bit over the Illuminated Earth if I'm specifically wanting to work with plant spirits, but either is amazing. I love both of these decks so much. And again, this, just like the Illuminated Earth Oracle, I use this one primarily in like a conversational way. Now, if you guys have been here for a while, you know that I'm a really messy reader, so I tend to pull from like 3 or 4 decks at once. So when I have been working with my plant spirits to craft this workshop inside the temple, I have been using usually 3 of the decks on this list at once. So those are Claire Mack's decks. Now the next one is Tarot of the Abyss. Now, this is personally the only deck I'm using for communicating with plant spirits at this time in my practice. I know that there are lots and lots of plant-based tarot decks out there. I have one, I think. But again, for me, because my history and my entryway into this spiritual practice was not through herbalism, I can find those to be confining in this way, right? I'm going to have more luck personally with an animal deck to talk to plants than a plant deck. You might be opposite. So this is the tarot deck that I've been using. So again, it's earthy, but it's not just plants, because on a tarot deck, when I just have like roses or nettles, it just doesn't help me very much. But this deck is so earthy, and while yes, there are people on it, I just don't have a problem reading this as messages from my plant spirits. It's very heart-centered for me and also very earthy. And to me, that is what plants do. They are kind of bridging those things. So this is my personal top recommendation for a tarot deck for communicating with plants, is Tarot of the Abyss. So this is one of the decks I've been drawing from almost every day as I've been preparing for this workshop. So my favorite deck for this, my top deck for working with plants as a sacred feminine mystery, one of my top decks of all time anyway, is the Magical Botanical Oracle. I just love this deck so much. I use it for everything. For me, it's the guidebook, but this deck is so earthy and also has all the associations built in. It really does what I was talking about with plant magic as a sacred feminine mystery. It really holds all of those pillars within it. Helps us to get local. It helps us to get universal. It helps us to treat the plant as a sovereign being, as a sovereign ally. Just all the things. So I do enjoy the artwork. Again, it's not my favorite artwork on the planet, but I enjoy the artwork. But for me, it really is about the guidebook. So when we go into the guidebook, here's Ivy. we have all the associations, right? All the planetary associations. So it says Saturn, Venus, Moon, Jupiter. It has the elemental associations of earth and air. And then we get a couple pages of information for each plant. So we have a magical meaning, we have the plant spirit medicine, then we have a divination and a reversed divination, and we have an affirmation as well. So for Ivy, it says, I am rooted in the blessings of my life. And so this guidebook, I think, really did a good job of plugging into plants as animistic, as sovereign allies, as magical. Like, this is really my top deck if I'm going to connect with plants in this way, through the lens of a sacred feminine mystery. So for me, what I have been doing in preparation for this workshop is I've been pulling from this every day as my kind of message, if you will. Then Tarot of the Abyss, 2 to 3 cards to flesh the message out, to get some details, or if I have a specific question about the message. And then from one of these 2 decks for clarification. I have also used the Rose Oracle a lot for this. I have honestly used the Herbiary deck less for this particular workshop, but it absolutely belongs on the list. So these are my deck recommendations for working with plants as a sacred feminine mystery. Please let me know if you have any questions below, if there's anything you want me to talk about more. And if you really want to do a deep dive with this, then this workshop, this initiation, is inside the temple.